Joining us now on Houston Sports Talk is Chronicle Astros beat writer Evan Drellich. Thanks for joining us again, Evan. And I'm going to start off with the tough question right out of the box. We're about at the quarter pole of the season, and I need for you to come up with some positives for the Astros at this point. The Titanic is sinking, Evan. Please throw us a life raft.
Well, the starting pitching has been the bright spot, right? Dallas. I don't think anybody expected Dallas Keuchel would be the team's best pitcher at this point in the season, but that's what he's been. You know, he leads the majors among qualified pitchers in ground ball rate. He's among the top pitchers in terms of weak contact induced. So he's been a real positive. Colin McHugh, I don't think we know yet what he'll be, but I don't think anybody thought he would be quite as good as he's been. Three of four very good starts. Feldman, you know, before he got hurt, there was a bit of a velocity drop. He's come back now, made one start, and it seems like the velocity is a little bit better. So that's encouraging, particularly because this guy conceivably will be around not through just this season, but the next two seasons if they don't trade him at some point. Cozart, he's still, in many ways, the most intriguing arm they have just because of the velocity. I mean, this is a guy who sits 95. There just aren't that many pitchers that do that. You don't always see the strikeout numbers that you kind of expect from him. But every time he goes out there, I think he's kind of one of the most interesting pitchers to watch. If there is a positive right now, it's the starting pitching. And also, of late, the offense has picked it up. You look at the May numbers. Matt Dominguez is hitting very well lately. Even Mark Krause is hitting well. Altuve has been pretty much the only bright spot from start to where we are now, right? He's the only guy who's kind of been consistent throughout. Things have gotten a little bit better of late. The batting average on balls in play has crept up, which we expected because it just was so extraordinarily low through the first few weeks of the season. Is
Springer coming around kind of a positive as well? George Springer?
Yeah. I mean, for the life of me, I can't understand why he was batting cleanup. And I think that was his third game of the season. I thought that was a terrible experiment. Even if he took to it right away, I don't know why you would put him in that position to feel any extra pressure. You know, this is already a guy who came in with a tremendous amount of hype, and to throw him right into the cleanup spot, I don't think he would ever say, yeah, I felt pressure because of it. But you just don't need to even test it. Why put him in that situation? He's come around. He was doing some drills to shorten his swing. Ralph Dickinson described a few of those to me. It'll be interesting to see what he ends up at the end of the season. And the strikeouts are still high, but even the 2 home runs he hit, boy, those things got out in a hurry. And you know, he's fun. He's just so fun to watch play in right field. Climbing walls. He's just so athletic. He's definitely a bright spot. Yeah.
The one thing I was going to ask you about with Springer that I was a little worried about is I think he has 5 walks in his so far, which is really, really low. I thought his walk total would be higher. He looked like, especially in spring training, that he was going to be a little bit more selective, and his numbers in the minors show that he does pick up some walks.
It just goes back to the overall plate discipline issue and getting adjusted to the majors. I mean, certainly it's not an acceptable walk rate as it stands now. You would expect it to pick up. It's a matter of a kid who's in the majors for the first time and controlling the strike zone and knowing what pitches he should go after and not trying to do too much, right? I mean that's it. It's all kind of part of the same thing, I think. You tie it all together with the walks and the strikeouts and just his overall approach as he adjusts.
I think it's the learning curve for George Springer, just the adjustment to the major league still. It's still a big leap to come up even from AAA to the major league level. But I wanted to ask about a couple of other guys in the lineup, or a guy that is a utility player that has come into the lineup throughout the course of the season. That's Marwin Gonzalez, who seems to be having a good year. And then also Jonathan Villar, who has 9 stolen bases already, plays a solid defense, and has 5 home runs as we speak here in May.
Yeah, VR is definitely a pleasant surprise, and I did a pretty long story on him in spring training, and there was maturity questions, and Jeff Luna was pretty upfront about that. They wanted to see him grow up. He's still very young. He seems to have put it together a bit, and I think there's some credit deserved owed to Altuve, who, despite being basically the same age, seems to be a little bit more advanced, a little bit more mature. But they're very fun. The both of them to watch up the middle are really fun. I don't think people expected VR to be quite as good as he has been. I was talking to a scout the other day, we're going up and down the lineup, and really there's not a lot of guys that you want to write home about, but I think the way the scout put it is he's a nice little player. And it's true. If he can continue to grow, this is a guy who does have the proverbial 5-tool talents. So yeah, there's a bright spot there. Marwin made a fantastic play the other day. I don't know if you guys I'm trying to remember which game it was. There was a ball up the middle, and his momentum was good. They were in a shift, and his momentum was going away from first base, and he managed to backhand it and still throw it on the run. It was a fantastic play, and he's hitting like 400. I think it's 417 in May, and that's in limited time. It's only in 7 games, and we're already May 12th, but he has looked good of late. The offense as a whole has just been better of late. And Marwin and other, Mark Krause. Until I looked at the numbers yesterday, I didn't realize he'd actually had a very good month, but he has.
I guess as we look at the record, though, that coming into the Rangers series, the Astros are 12-26. We were told at the beginning of the season, this is going to be an improved team. You were thinking maybe at least out of the gate they could be more competitive, and yet that hasn't happened.
That's the frustrating part about this. The talk all winter was we're gonna see significant improvement overall, and we're gonna see an improved bullpen. Well, neither of those things have happened yet. The team is a game or two ahead of last year's pace. Although, if that's really what you're measuring against, there's nothing to write home about. There's no question it's been a disappointment. We're quickly hitting the point in the year where really it's early excuse is no longer valid. It's also, now that we're basically in mid-May, we're probably no more than a month away from seeing John Singleton and Mike Fultonevich get up here, assuming that they remain productive at AAA and healthy and all that. I think anyone watching figures at this point that the Astros are just waiting for the Super 2 deadlines to pass, which may or may not be the case. They'll never admit to it if that's the case. But there is still that feeling, and it was a feeling we had at the start of the season before Springer got here, of, well, there could be help on the way. But as we've seen with Springer, it can be a little bit of a rocky start. The second John Singleton gets here, is he going to mash? We don't know that. Is Fultonevich? Fultonevich had a rough start to the season. He's pitched very well of late, but we don't know. But there is still kind of that feeling that there is help in the pipeline, and ultimately, that's going to be the feeling throughout the rest of this year, and I'm sure through next year too. Is that we're just going to be constantly waiting for that next name.
Speaking of guys in the AAA, Oklahoma City, Austin Waits is a guy that's intrigued me because I look at his numbers, and he's a career over 800 OPS guy. So he's been good all the way through the minors from what I can tell. And this year he's having a great season down there. He's not a power guy or a speed guy, so he doesn't fit that mold. But he's 25 right now. He's 25 years old. With all the guys that can barely scratch 200 with the Astros, when does a guy like Austin Waits just get a shot? He's not a guy that you're worried about with Super 2s and all that stuff, being that he's 25, and he's not one of these guys that's expected to be an MVP caliber type guy.
It goes to a question of, why does a guy like Chris Carter stick around? Why does a guy like Alex Presley stick around? If you got rid of Carter, they could put him on waivers, right? They could outright him. I asked a scout the other day, you think Chris Carter would make it through waivers? They said, yeah. They don't want to risk losing a piece that could be valuable, right? I think it comes down to a roster issue. You don't want to give up on guys that could be valuable ahead of time. I would be surprised if we didn't see Austin at some point this year. Right now, they clearly have shown they're not willing to pull the plug on some of the guys they have. They want to see what they have. Look, if Chris Carter gets hot in the next month here, maybe there's a trade piece. Maybe Alex Presley, that's my feeling, is that they just don't want to bail on the guys that they currently have on the 25 and 40 man roster. But yeah, if Waits keeps hitting, it looks bad when they keep all these guys down at AAA that are performing well and aren't on the major league team.
That's been one of my things about like Chris Carter. He seems to be one of those, as you're mentioning, that power is such a commodity in baseball these days, and he does have that value, being a power hitter who can hit you 25 to 30 home runs, but yet his average is low and he strikes out a ton. The reason that they're keeping him around, right, is to see potentially either he gets it and he becomes that guy that hits 250 with 30 to 35 home runs, or he can be traded. But yeah, you really don't want to give up on a guy like that because power is so valued in baseball.
Yeah, I think that's ultimately it. You look at the slash line, there's still that 100-point separation, right, between the average OBP and the slugging that you kind of look forward. So on some level, he is seeing the ball. It's not like he's not drawing his walks. He can't be any worse, right? I mean, by the end of the season, you expect some of this to even out a bit. And yeah, ultimately, where else are you going to get potentially, let's say at this point he finishes with 25 home runs. How many guys in the Astros lineup are going to finish with 25 home runs? Even if he hits 200, it's kind of a situation, well, he's probably better than anything we have, even if his at-bats can be very frustrating to watch.
The Astros fans know that as bad as your offense is at times, if you just have a pitching staff that keeps you in games like they did in 2005, you can be in these games and have a chance to win. And as you said, the starters have been decent. It's the bullpen that's been a big problem. And, you got unlucky with Matt Albers. Crane hasn't been healthy. But with those two guys coming back, if you could just somehow escape some of these games with the bullpen, then the Astros could be in a lot more games as the year goes along, I would think.
I still don't understand why the Astros didn't sign Crane to an incentive deal. And I'm pretty sure they talked about it, but that's one of the more puzzling things to me, just because of looking back at how last year went for him. Look at the free agents they brought in. The injuries haven't been good so far. We've already had Feldman go on the DL. We have Albers on the DL. Qualls was unavailable for the last couple of days, although he pitched yesterday. You're right. There's reason for optimism. I kind of subscribe to a feeling of it just can't get worse. The bullpen entering yesterday was more than a full run worse than any team in the majors. Right. It just phenomenally bad. And it should only get better. Yeah. If the starting pitching can keep up, if Dallas Keuchel can keep it up, there is reason for some optimism as we go along.
Who are some of the other arms in the bullpen that can maybe step it up or can be added to the bullpen maybe from down at AAA during the course of the season? Because, we've seen the inconsistency from, the Josh Fields and Josh Side and, Jerome Williams was supposed to be that swing guy that could pitch in the rotation or the bullpen, and he's had problems and inconsistency. Anthony Bass, inconsistent too.
Yeah.
It's a lot of inconsistency there.
The guys who were invited to spring training are the guys who are probably closest. Rudy Owens is a name to consider. Nick Tropiano is an interesting one. We saw Chai-Jun Low at the end of last season. Fields, I think there was a point there. He was pitching well until we had the string of games where he just imploded. I think the potential is still there for him, and I'm sure we'll see him again. He still profiles as a back-end guy, right? He's a guy you watch pitch and say, well, he really could be an eighth, ninth inning guy. Chad Qualls could be better than he's been, and I wouldn't be surprised if he got better if maybe they look to move him. It wouldn't be – we're not that far away from trade season at this point, right? To some degree, these guys need to get better so that the Astros might be able to deal a part or two and get something back for them.
Who do you think might be some trade chips coming up in July from this team this year? Because really, we've been told kind of that after last year, Luna, with the sell-off at the trading deadline over the last couple of years, that really wasn't going to happen this upcoming season. But there are always going to be a few pieces that you can trade.
Yeah, well, that's really the rub, is what's going to happen here. If this team remains as bad as it's been, just so far out of it, does Jeff and everybody else feel an obligation to stick with the talent so that they can actually finish a little bit better than last year? Do they say, screw it, let's go for another number one pick and trade them all off? Tony Sipp could be a guy they could trade. Somebody might need a lefty. You saw the way he pitched yesterday. I think Qualls is a guy they could trade. Fowler it might be the most interesting of the bunch. He's got a year of control left. He's having an okay season, but somebody might be able to use him. And what do the Astros think going forward? Are they going to be willing to pay him? Are they going to want to pay him in arbitration next year? Would they consider going to a longer term deal with him? They want to put Springer in center. We know that. Would Dexter want to play a corner? It's hard to see Dexter sticking around here long term. He's the one I'd be most curious to see what happens. But if you trade Dexter Fowler, it goes back to that original point. Well, what does it say about your hope for this season? And Jeff has been, Jeff left wiggle room for himself, said, we'll see where we're at. But he did say that, yes, we do have to approach this year differently. I don't think they could trade Scott Feldman, because if you trade Scott Feldman, who signed a 3-year deal here, what is the message that sends to other free agents? Oh, I'm going to sign a 3-year deal in Houston, and then they're going to ship me out within the first year. There's some sort of level of decorum or appearance to keep up with this type of stuff.
We'll let you get out of here, Evan, unless you wanted to give us maybe a grade on the Texans draft. Everybody else has an opinion. You want to throw something out?
I got nothing for you guys. I'm tunnel vision on.
Yeah,
I'm tunnel vision on this team.
No, that's okay.
Did enjoy John McClane eating the front page. I thought that was fun.
Yeah. Well, you can catch Evan on Chron.com or pick up a Houston Chronicle and read Evan's stuff. He's the Astros beat writer, and thanks again, Evan, for joining us on the podcast. Really appreciate it.